Okay. Good afternoon. I am Sandra from Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center. Um, we do these monthly lunch and learns with different topics that we want to share with our followers and with other people that you may not be following us right now. But we want to make sure that we are sharing information that is helpful and really kind of breaking down some of the shortcuts on kind of maneuvering through a system or, making sure that you know about available resources that are out there. So the topic for this month is child abuse prevention. It is currently Child Abuse Prevention Month, which is April, because that's where we are right now. If you're watching this live, if you're watching this recorded, then it really doesn't really matter like what month it is. So with us today is my deputy director at MCVRC, Joanna Mupanduki, Taylor Pyles, who is from the Blue Ribbon Project and also a former police officer, and then Catherine Meyers, who is from the Center for Children. I will let them do a brief introduction and then we'll hop right in. So let me just start with Joanna.
All right. Hello, I'm Joanna Mupanduki. I'm the Deputy Director here at Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center. I've been an attorney since 2007 with mostly a background in prosecution. Also worked in California for the Department of State Hospitals and as a victim rights attorney for the Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center. So I'm excited to be here and to talk about this very important topic. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanna. Taylor?
My name is Taylor Pyles. I'm from a local nonprofit called the Blue Ribbon Project. We provide a series of programs for abused and neglected children, as well as children that are in foster care. I'm also a retired detective from Annapolis Police Department. There I fell under violent crimes. My primary task was crimes against children. I'm also an adult survivor of physical abuse and grew up in the foster care system here in Maryland. So I'm kind of coming at it from different angles.
Thanks so much, Taylor, and thanks for doing what you do. And Cathy.
Hi, my name is Cathy Meyers, and I'm the Executive Director and founder of the Center for Children, which is a child abuse prevention education. We do a lot of training, and we also do a lot of behavioral health programs in 6 counties in Maryland. And I've been in the field for 36 years now.
Wow. Thanks so much, Cathy, and thank you for doing what you do. All right, so let's hop right in. So I guess I just wanted to start off with saying that as a mother, I feel like, am I lagging? Oh, okay. That must just be on my end then. So as I'm a mother of children, and sometimes it is very challenging. And, there's a lot of controversy as far as, how to discipline children, what is the best way, whether people believe in spankings or what have you. And I think that debate has been going on for a long time. But I think that most importantly is that a lot of times, like, parents will lose their cool. And there's a huge difference between disciplining a child and abusing a child. I wanted to kind of throw that out there, just kind of just acknowledging that parenting is a challenge, but also that there are tips and hints and other resources that are available if you find yourself in a situation where you acknowledge that you are not in control of the discipline process. And so I'm going to throw this out to both Cathy and Taylor, because you guys are definitely aware of some of those programs that are available. If you wanted to just start us off on some of the tips, hints, and resources.
Okay, Cathy, you want to go first, or you want me to take it?
Go ahead, take it off.
Okay. So with child abuse prevention, one of the things that I've seen a lot in my career was, as you mentioned, parents losing their cool with things. When it starts off as physical discipline, it gets out of control. And things just go too far. One of the things that I used to do is if I had photographs of physical abuse, of injuries and things like that, show them to the offender or, the parent or the guardian that was responsible for that. And almost always they say, I didn't mean to do all that. It's almost like they black out, if you will, during that physical discipline. So it's important, you got to find ways to keep that from happening. Not necessarily lose your cool, but sometimes you just need to walk away. And I've talked to parents before that did the right thing and left the child alone, went into a closet, screamed, cried, and then came back out after they got it all out of their system, and then dealt with it that way. Send a child to their room, just kind of separate from them, before you reach that point where you're losing your cool. That's probably the biggest thing, because when I talk to these parents, I've got no doubt that they actually love and care for their children. They just took things a little too far. So they're not in how do I say it? In other aspects of the family, they're a good parent. They take care of the children and things like that. Just their discipline skills aren't the same as what, or aren't what they should be, or think they just lose their control and things get out of hand.
And I'm going to ditto a little bit of what Taylor said. People don't discipline their children with physical violence when they're calm and cool and collected. It's usually when they're very upset. And so as much time as you can put between the events that's causing that reaction, and if you are going to discipline, when you do the discipline is better for the kids. But also, I always used to say to parents, don't get into a battle that you can't win. And sometimes it's better not to just to stop the discussion, because you can't fight with somebody who doesn't want to fight. And so particularly with middle schoolers, later elementary, sometimes it's just, we're not going to have a discussion. And because a kid can't fight with you if you're not going to have that, you're not going to give them the audience. So sometimes it's best not to be involved. And then the other thing I say to parents is sometimes we set up disciplines that don't fit the age of the child. So it's always about discipline that you can live with and that's reasonable. And, you don't take a 5-year-old and say you're going to be in your room for the summer, for example, because that's something you can't live with and you're not going to stick to. So make sure that when you do give a disciplinary action, it's something that is reasonable and that you can live with and stick to. Because if you don't stick to it, the kids learn pretty quickly. You're not going to follow through. So that's the worst lesson for them to learn.
Yeah, I definitely can agree with Taylor, because so my mom was a spanker. Like I was a spanked child when I was younger, and I just remember she would always send me to my room, and just the knowing that she was coming in 5 or 10 minutes, but she would really kind of sit and think about it, and she did a great job in that, because I think that I was very similar to my children when they were younger. Now that electronics exist, I feel like it's always taking their phone or taking the TV or taking video games or something. So it's really kind of easy. Whereas when we were kids, she was going to take books away that I was reading. I mean, so anyway, so thank you for, I think the timing, really kind of hit a note with me, because I think that is a great way to kind of make sure that you're just in your right mind and really kind of settled into your thoughts. And I know that time also, something that I learned with my son, who is a very highly spirited child, and still is. He's now 18, so I've done really well at this point. But when he was younger, I took this session that was available at the school, and it was anger management, for your child. And it was giving him time as well to process, and so that we could always start with a discussion or what have you. So I think time is an amazing asset in this instance. So thank you for that. And then I wanted to see if there were resources that were available for, just kind of tightening up your parenting skills and maybe discipline skills. Are there classes or sessions or other resources that people can look at, even websites, I think, that you guys know about that you would like to share?
This is Cathy. I don't know about specific websites, but I'm sure there's tons of stuff on the web. Just make sure that if you're going to the internet to find those resources, that you make sure the website is produced by a reputable organization, and not, somebody's personal opinion that has no background or experience, because you may get erroneous information. But in all of the counties, parenting classes are hard to come by, quite honestly, and part of that is a funding issue. I think most providers would tell you that it's not a mental health. You can't get reimbursed that way. And so unless there's specific grant funding, it's really hard for providers to do that. But find some support groups. Anybody that tells you parenting I've never, ever met anybody who absolutely never got upset with their children. And if they do tell you that, they're lying. I don't care how experienced or professional they are. So, but look in each county, the local mental health authority, sometimes the local children's boards have lists of providers that do that. Sometimes, believe it or not, the courts have a list of providers that do parenting classes. Sometimes the courts do them themselves in certain jurisdictions, but find a resource. You know, you're not alone. Don't be embarrassed. It's much better to get that help up front rather than after the police or the courts have told you or social services that you had to. So reach out.
And there are some decent websites out there. What is it? Childwelfare.gov. I think they've got some good articles on there. A whole variety of things about just child abuse and child neglect. The Blue Ribbon Project, we put articles on our website as well. We're in the process of redesigning our website, so we're adding articles on there as we go on. Another place that I found helpful, and it sounds strange coming from a guy, but some of the moms groups out there. I know there's like Annapolis Moms. There's a lot of parents on there that ask questions like, my child is doing this, how do I handle this? And you kind of get an idea of the group where they can offer some additional suggestions and things like that. As Cathy had pointed out, you got to be careful of your resources because some of it is opinion. But I've seen some good advice actually given in some of those groups. So that's something to keep in mind. Unfortunately, you just got to kind of search it out a little bit and find out what's out there.
I love the moms groups as a resource. I am in one of our local moms groups, and I always want to tag my husband on things because I'm like, oh, what a great, whatever, like resource or whatever for our kids, because we have varying ages of children. And then of course it's a mom's club, so he's not in it. So I do love that because I do feel like, women tend to create like a little tribe, and they're always sharing. And also, with social media, especially with Facebook, like they have that anonymous posting now. So, it's nice that it creates a safe space for someone to say, I lost control and this is what happened, and maybe find support in that capacity. So I love that as a resource, just because I do think that, knowing that you're not alone in maybe losing your temper, losing your cool, is powerful. And also, to find just regular people that aren't, sometimes in these cases, like, it's intimidating to go to law enforcement or a more professional organization because, you don't want to be looked at, but you also, you don't want to be judged, but you also want to find resources or make yourself better. So at least people are taking proactive steps in doing that. So thanks for that. And I guess that brings me right into the difference between disciplining and child abuse. Like, where do we draw this line? And I told you guys all this story about how my of course it's always going to be my 18-year-old that the stories are going to be about, because he's just that little kid that just was highly spirited. I had the book and everything. Is that he was always jumping off of things, or like rough and tumble, like he would, just a boy's boy, like just with bruises all the time. And I remember going to the doctor's office and going like, listen, this kid's like jumping off the counter, and like, I swear these aren't marks for me. And they were like, oh yeah, we know, because of the placement of the bruises or whatever. Like they could tell that it wasn't like my hands or what have you. But point being is that there's a difference between discipline and child abuse, and where is that line drawn, and how do we recognize things? Because I think that everyone is concerned and wants to care about children that are around them, their neighbors. If you're a teacher, students that, you see something or you're not really sure, maybe it's not what you think it is. Where do we start drawing that line? And how would you identify signs of child abuse in different situations?
Taylor, I'm going to let you take that first because you have the law enforcement background.
Okay. In all honesty, I do have a hard time. It's not necessarily a fine line between, just what is too far. And, our policy in our household is we don't do any physical discipline. But my children are 6 and 3. they can be a handful of times. So sometimes, not that I question our policy here, but I can really see how parents, do what they do with physical discipline. One of the things that has changed is things have changed a lot since we were children. When we used to get spanked and hit all the time, and that kind of thing, where it's not necessarily appropriate now, and it's actually you're doing more damage to the child than you are at other forms of discipline. That's why our policy is no physical discipline whatsoever. We can take away toys, we can take away games, we can ground them to the room for a while, in certain things. So there are different ways to do that. One of the things that we also do is, at least with our 6-year-old, is frequently talk to him about the difference between right and wrong and why he's in trouble, and help them understand kind of what's going on, the bigger picture. As far as recognizing abuse and what you see with other children, whether it's a neighbor or if you're in some sort of profession where you're encountering children, the biggest red flag that I've always had is any type of pattern injury that you see, whether it's from a belt or a hand. You can really make out what's going on. Sandy, as you mentioned, my kids, they do the same thing, jump off the couches and all that. My daughter, she's 3, she's got all kinds of bruises, and I ask her, how did she get that bruise? And she doesn't know. It happens. And if something doesn't seem right, usually when the hair on the back of your neck stands up, that's a good clue that something is not right that's going on there. So pattern injury. See how parents act around the children. Are they acting appropriately at times? As an example, my son, he's in Taekwondo. There was, she's no longer there, but there was one parent that would not go too far, but kind of pushed the line a little bit when she was disciplining one of her children that would he was about 3 years old, and would kind of act up a little bit during the Taekwondo class, sitting in the audience. So I'd watch her, and sometimes I'd wondered what was going on inside that home. I never saw anything that was overly alarming, where I would notify authorities or anything like that. But, like I said, it did catch my attention. So just be observant as to what's going on, how there's interaction with them, even if you don't see any injury. Or one of the things that I'd see come up in my police investigations with physical abuse is not allowing the child to ever come outside, that they were always in trouble. They were always locked in their room, especially if they're siblings. The siblings are always outside playing, especially on a day like today where the weather's nice. But there's that one sibling that you never see that gets off the bus and immediately goes home. Are they trying to hide something? Is there something not right? Because that was one of the things that would come up. Is I would interview, friends of the family, if I knew who they were, any witnesses or anything like that. A lot of them said I was kind of suspicious of something going on, but I didn't know what it was. So that the red flags were going up. So you definitely want to keep an eye on that. And I think we're going to get into mandating reporting a little bit later. But the good thing about mandated reporting is if you make that report, if you're not right about it, it's okay. If you suspect something and it turns out there's nothing going on, it's okay. There's no criminal charge against you. In fact, there's actually a criminal charge if you don't report. But if you make that report, what it does is kind of opens the door with the Department of Social Services. It doesn't necessarily mean, look, I'm going to make this report and somebody's going to jail. But it opens that door of social services, because a lot of times all these families need some resources. They need some help. Sometimes it's as simple as you can't discipline your child like that, to other things where if the family's struggling, with financially or getting from some things, so the parents are always under stress because they feel they can't provide for their family. And that stress is building up. Unfortunately, that's where the outlet comes out, is in that physical discipline. So maybe that family just needs help getting some food, getting some other things. Maybe there's signs that look like neglect. It's you just want to keep an eye on it, but you're not going to get in trouble for reporting it. And I encourage everybody to report it. I don't know if social services feels that way, because that's a lot of phone calls that they're getting for those reports. But it opens up that door to many things.
And one of the things when we're talking about discipline, especially younger children, up to about age 8 learn by observation. And so basically, if you're hitting your children, what you're teaching them is it's okay to hit people as long as they're bigger, as long as you're bigger than they are. So you can hit people as long as you're bigger than they are. That's what they're learning. So, and then there becomes an age where that doesn't work any longer. It's very difficult to physically discipline middle school and teenagers. And I've seen some pretty horrendous cases where, outright physical fights happened. And just something you said, Sandra, earlier about taking away a phone. I've also seen here in the last few years a lot of physical abuse cases, and because somebody was trying to take away their teenager's phone, and it ended up into a physical confrontation. Well, what I would say to parents is,
they want to keep that phone, boy. They really want that phone.
Get into that battle, because you can go online on Verizon or whoever your carrier is and suspend the service. You don't have to fight over the physical.
Like, yeah, you keep the phone. Turned off the service, though.
Cut off the
I used to turn off my kids' Wi-Fi on their TVs. Because you know how, like, it's from the router, and I'd block it from the app that was on my phone. I'd be like, nope, block, 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 block.
That way you don't have to get in the physical confrontation.
We definitely get smarter as parents as it goes, as long as we're looking for other venues.
Can you guys address, there was a comment that just showed up where the comment was like that they're being told, the parents are saying, well, that's how my parents raised me. And how do you guys suggest, like, kind of breaking that generational cycle, and what the best methods for that may be?
We actually see that and hear that quite a bit. And quite honestly, sometimes we even hear it when we've made child abuse reports from some of the responders, because that was how they were raised, and that's their firm belief that it's okay up to a point. And it's about talking through it. There are many things that have changed since we were kids. We don't watch the same kind of television. TVs were black and white when I grew up too. We didn't have, the first cell phones were the size of a, they were huge. They were the size of a
battery.
You had to get your battery installed. So there, you have to be open to change. And sometimes people, I hear people say, I turned out fine, but you got to, when you talk them through that, that's not really what's underneath that. That is really a hard shell with a very soft interior. So it's about talking to folks. And just not going, okay, you were raised that way, and letting it go. But you also can't come at them angry, defensive, punitive, judgy, because if you're judgy, they are not going to talk with you. So that would be.
I love that topic as well, because I remember, again, back to my mom. My mom was so great. Is that after a certain amount of time, like my parents had split, she's like, you know what, I'm not doing this anymore. Like, I'm not going to spank you guys anymore. That's just not what we're going to do. So I tell you what she did, and I do it to I did the same thing. Like, I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. She gave me a stern talking to on the couch, and she was only done talking to me when I was crying and I felt bad. And then she'd be like, yep, done. That's what, she would guilt me into the, I work so hard to give you the things that I give you. And I would be like, and I think emotionally, like making me connect with the wrongdoing that I was doing was such a better way to do it, and really just kind of like opening conversations. So you'll be happy to hear that. Yes, me and my 18-year-old, we're great. Like we talk about everything now, and it's because we could talk about those things early on. And I think breaking the cycle is really, like I said, us being better. Like, you always you want better for your children than what you had. And part of it is being a better parent to provide that to them. So thank you, Deidre, for your comment. And it's so true. There are so many things that we need to break cycles for in our lives. And I think child abuse and physical punishment is one of them. But also, I mean, we talked about this during the domestic violence session as well, because people accept violence as a form of, whatever it is. And we don't have to do that anymore. We can move on, and we've got words, and we have so many resources that are available. One of the things that I also wrote down while you guys were talking was how you brought up, like, that there might be stress because of no food or no whatever. And I think that's why, we do these lunch and learns. And even if we're going to do something about food scarcity, is because it really kind of feeds into everything that we do at Maryland Crime Victims, because we're dealing with the back end, right? We're dealing with, why did things happen? Oh, well, this guy was out there doing something illegal because they don't have food. Like, how do you fault people when, their children or their family's hungry? We see a lot of that. And so by sharing resources, we really can, chip away at some of the things that are causing issues. Recognizing signs of child abuse is definitely a challenging one. I taught as well, and there's a difference between a child who's abused and a child who just is income insecure, or doesn't have the best clothes, or they're kind of like not as clean as you think they should be. That's a huge difference of a child not a child being abused, right? Like parents not having money to buy name brand clothes, or what have you, is one thing, but child abuse is another. So it is really hard to identify. I mean, there was a few kids that I saw that I questioned, and I was in middle school. I was teaching middle school before COVID, so very interesting ages of children. So on to reporting abuse and mandatory reporting. I think one of the things that I talked about, Deidre just commented again. She said, I also learned that educating parents is key. There are parents that are not knowledgeable of developmental milestones, so the expectations they have for their children are not realistic. So true. So extremely true.
And Deandra, if I could respond to that, that's
Yeah.
one of the number one reasons children under the age of 3 get spanked, is because of wetting their pants or crying. So it's really important that parents know what the expectations should be for the different ages. The same thing is true. I see people put their 3-year-old in timeout for like half an hour. Timeout should be probably less than 5 minutes for a 3-year-old, because it's all comparable to the age.
Right. Definitely appreciate that. And yes, Deidre, you're absolutely right. And, those milestones, even emotional like milestones for teenagers is, we always assume that they assume that they know everything. So it's hard for you. You start agreeing with them, but you know everything. But you also need to remember what your age is, and just remember that you need to kind of act align with that. But for the reporting abuse and mandated reporting, I always think of, there's this kid that lives across the street from me. It's kind of like catty corner. And this kid, like, he never had shoes on. Like, we used to be like, what's up with shoeless Joe Jackson? Like, that's what we always called this kid. I don't even know what his name was. And like, we always questioned like what was going on at that house. But because we could see the house, we would be like, well, what if the police came to our house and then immediately went over there? They would know that the call came from us. And so it's like, you want to get involved, but you don't want to really out yourself. So help me with, who is mandatory reporting people? How would you go about reporting abuse? And should we be afraid of any of those type of retaliations that I think we normal folks think about? I know the answer to this because my husband is a police officer, but I want to throw it out there to the rest of the world.
Well, the first thing I'd say, which will surprise people, is we're all mandated reporters.
Yep.
In the law, everyone is a mandated reporter. Where the line is that if you're professional, there's a consequence for not. And I think Taylor mentioned the law. There is now a criminal fine and a criminal punishment for professionals who fail to report child abuse. And we even, because, a lot of the child abuse records, when there's reports, are not kept long-term in the system. Our agency, every child abuse report we make, anybody, our agent, it goes in an archive file, so that if down the road somebody says you knew about this and you didn't report, we actually have the record of the report. And it's a safety precaution for our clinical staff, because we probably deal with 3 or 4 child abuse reports a week, because of the nature of what we do. But we also, I don't want anybody in our agency to, down the road, get a 3-year penalty and a $10,000 fine for failure to report. So, and what I would say to lay people is, I always ask the question, can you live with yourself if you report and there's nothing wrong? And can you live with yourself if you don't report and a child is killed or seriously injured? And I always say I can live with myself way better in the first scenario, and I could not live with myself in the second scenario. So that's kind of a way to make it a little bit better. And I don't know if Taylor wants to respond to the whole system response and in terms of the reporting.
Yeah. So the good thing about mandated reporting is you're immune from any type of. If you're wrong, they're not going to charge you with a crime. You're doing it in good faith. They're not going to hold that against you if you believe that something's going on and it turns out that there's nothing. So not only you're mandated to report it, but there's really no consequences if you're wrong, which is good, because some people think, oh, that they're going to sue me if I'm wrong, or they're going to do this, they're going to do that, and you're immune to all of that, and that's spelled out in the law, as far as that goes. So you definitely want to make the report whether you're not certain. One of the things I tell people is don't do your own investigation to determine what's going on. If you suspect it and those red flags are there, make that report. Let social services do what social services do. One of the things that most, I can't say all law enforcement agencies do it, but it's something that I always did in my police reports, is oftentimes I didn't even put in the name of the reporter into my actual report. Now, social services would have that record somewhere, but I would put on this date, this time, a mandated reporter contacted Annapolis Police and reported this, and I'll leave it at that. Or this was reported to Annapolis Police Department. I wouldn't say Miss Jones, who's across the street from Mr. Smith, made this report because she believed that Mr. Smith was harming the children. That's not how the reports are written, or anything like that. Also, a lot of with the police reports, a lot of things are shielded because we are dealing with juveniles. We're dealing with people that may or may not even be accused of a crime. Sometimes physical discipline is not a crime. You'll get somebody that thinks that a simple spanking would be a crime when it's not. It would be physical discipline if it not goes too far. So we have differing definitions of what abuse is. So what happens if I make that report because I believe that this is abuse when it's actually not? People are kind of worry about that. So don't do your own investigation. Just make that report and let the powers that be do what they do.
And I think now in Maryland is an alternative response state. It's been about 7 years or 8 years, I think. And so the initial response by social services, if there is not a history, and so this is the first time they're getting a physical abuse report in. This is not true of sexual abuse reports, but physical abuse reports, instead of having the parent have a founded case, what they will do is called an alternative response, and they'll recommend resources. And social services also has a lot of resources that they can put in play as well, and they will work with the family so that there isn't a subsequent report. If there are subsequent reports, then they won't handle it in the same way because what was put in place didn't work. But Maryland is an alternative response, and I can tell you we're the Child Advocacy Center in Charles County, and most of the physical abuse cases, they're either the real serious repetitive ones, which are not alternative response, or they get the alternative response and there's intervention put in place, and then we don't see them again. Which is the goal, is for them to get services and help and support, and then they're not coming into the social services system. And if they follow through with the recommendations of social services, they don't end up with a record in the registry for social services. So it's which might keep them down the road from getting a job or whatever. So alternative response is a really positive way for parents who, maybe this one time, I am thinking of a parent, the kid used the F word back to the parent. And that was not the normal response, but the response in that situation got out of hand. And so they were sent to alternative response. They went to parenting classes. The family got into family therapy, and there's been no subsequent reports. So, that's the goal. And the parents are not on the child abuse registry now.
That sounds great, because it's almost like you averted some issues that would possibly create longer term situations that, again, with the stresses and what have you, that can really kind of change people's home lives. But who do you report child abuse to?
So it can be law enforcement, it can be social services. Usually, what I tell people is, and especially like a program like this, we don't know where people are viewing from. Just get on your phone, get on Google, and say, "How do I report child abuse in Howard County or whatever county that you're in, or if you're in another state?" You'll get some phone numbers that are on there, or contact your local police department. The good thing about contacting the police department is it kind of puts the onus on them, where let them handle it, let them do what they do, and contact social services and go through that aspect of it. But it's one of the things that they are going to do. They're going to ask you a lot of questions when you do, make the report, especially with social services, some follow-up questions. That, whereas, how many children are within the home? You may not be able to answer all the questions, but there's as much information as they have, the better. Again, you don't want to do your own investigation, but if you know that weird stuff has been happening in that house before, you suspected abuse before, but you didn't, make a report at that time, you want to let them know all that information, with that, because a lot of times with physical abuse, it progressively gets worse and worse and worse over time. That's something to kind of keep in mind. So you want that early intervention to make that report. And again, just use Google. You can call 911. If people can call 911 about a parking complaint, you can call 911 because you feel that a child it might be being abused. So you're not going to get, you're not getting in trouble for calling 911 for that or anything like that. If you suspect something's going on, use those numbers, or you contact directly to social services. Now, if the child is in immediate danger or it's something serious, then definitely you want to call 911. Or if there's a serious injury, if you're a teacher, you work with children and they come into school or whatever the program is, and you see a significant injury, you definitely want to call 911, because oftentimes that child may need medical help as well. In fact, the majority of the abuse cases that I saw, I take them to the hospital anyway, for a variety of reasons, but just to get them checked out, make sure that there's no underlying injuries or something that's something more is not going on there.
That was a lot of information, and I feel like I had a lot of ideas. No, the information's great. It's I think my initial thought was calling Child Protective Services. I can just imagine the phone ringing and leaving messages all over the place. I feel like they're busy, and sometimes it's tough to get through. I do like the idea of the non-emergency line, if it's not currently actively, going on, of course.
Yep.
But also, like with schools, like is the local SRO for the child school, like if it's your neighbor, you pretty much know where they go. Are the SROs? I know that they report for the school, like when teachers think abuse is going on, like they kind of like work in-house to try to figure out with the PPW and like the personnel that is in charge of like their social welfare that's within the building, the counselors, the SRO. Is that an option for other people to go to as well?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Law enforcement's law enforcement. So, and I hate to say this, but sometimes maybe they don't want to handle it or things like that, but go to law enforcement. It'll make its way to the right hands.
Yeah. And I think that the nice thing about that is that it's usually local and it's an actual individual, whereas sometimes calling a switchboard or kind of like waiting, like you feel like, oh, I left a message, that's good enough, and then there might not be follow through, and it might slip your mind because you already took care of it. Whereas if things are ongoing, we just want to make sure that we are intentional and information is getting where it needs to go.
And Sandra, I do want to mention to people, because I hear this concern, where they've made a report and they don't know what happened. And there's a reason for that. It's confidentiality and protection of the family that's involved in the investigation. You would not want your business out there if it was you being investigated. And so they're very protective on all sides of that. In the old days, as a professional, we would get a letter saying, thank you very much for making a report, blah, blah, blah. But it would just, it was just a letter. They didn't tell you the outcome of the investigation or anything. So, but a lot of times people expect that they're going to get like a call back and say, oh, there was nothing, or yes, it was. And I just want to caution people, you're not going to get that. And it really, you have to trust that the authorities, you hope, are going to do what they need to do. And, and it may not be, like Taylor said, maybe you think it's abuse, it's not abuse or whatever, but you are not going to get a response back saying what's gone on with the investigation. And that's true of professionals as well as lay people. So don't think it's just because I'm the general public reporting, I'm not getting, no, professionals don't get it either. And it really is frustrating sometimes for professionals because they want to know what happened, and that they will not get that from social services.
So Deidre tuned in again and said that I am a Prince George's County school employee. That is a mandated reporter in PG County. There's a document that we have to fill out and send to CPS via fax, and it's also mailed. So definitely good to know that, people in the school system, they know what they can do. But I think that, like we said earlier, it's hard to identify, it's hard to catch. So I think, working together, we can possibly identify things, especially if you are going to the school and the teachers also had noticed it or what have you. Like, you just got to have a little bit more people that are kind of on the same page. And I know that, as we're talking, I'm constantly thinking about this one. It was a California case of child abuse. I think his name was Gabriel Fernandez. It was awful. It was just this awful case where just everyone just dropped the ball and the system just really failed. And I thought about him often while we were trying to put this together. And I thought of it. I also read this one book by this guy who survived child abuse. It was a thing called It, or
yes.
And
I've actually heard him speak.
I've read that entire series, and I just thought it was just so atrocious. Like, some of the things, I mean, it really is amazing what people have overcome. And, it's just more important at having all those aces that are, attributing to people in this life is so challenging, but trying to make a difference out there.
Can I just throw one thing in there real quick, Sandy?
Sure.
Just so from my personal experience, I mentioned being in foster care. Now, this was a long time ago. This was back in the 80s, but the reason why I ended up there was it led to physical abuse, but my mother had some mental health issues. A lot of changes have happened in the mental health realm, if you will, since then. But now that I'm older and I'm more open about it, there's people that I grew up with that said they had suspected something may have been going on, or their parents did, that something weird was going on in our house and that sort of thing. If somebody had made that report early, I know my entire life would have been completely different. That if there was an earlier intervention in it before it got to the point where it would, my mother probably would have gotten the help that she needed before it got too far out of hand and I had to be removed from the home. So that's another aspect to think of it with that early intervention. Instead of letting it drag on, it's going to get worse and worse, and then really bad things could happen. So, you had mentioned the Fernandez case, and it's one of those signs were there, just nobody was picking up on them. And then once it entered the system, unfortunately there was a lot of balls dropped in that also. But the signs were there and people weren't making the report. And, you always learn about these things after the fact. And I know hindsight's 20/20, but we got to learn from those experiences.
Absolutely. And Taylor, thank you for being so upfront with your story. And I think, it's right. I mean, it's amazing how people can empower other people in this life. And it's not just in this instance, it's in so many different instances. Whether it be, children with birth defects or domestic violence or whatever, it's you become empowered. And, there's so much power in the things that happen. We see it all the time with the victims that we deal with at Maryland Crime Victims. They are always, reaching out, trying to help another person and helping the next person. And so again, thank you for that. I can't thank you enough for the things that you do, just to make things better. And I think that that's what we all in our lines of work is where we live, and that's how we fill our cup. And that's so extremely important, even to people that might not be on the right path. We can kind of help guide them into better directions, and with education and resources.
And Sandra, you mentioned adverse childhood. We mentioned ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. Maryland has a ACEs project, And for those who may not be familiar, just look up adverse childhood experiences on the internet. It's all over the place. But I'm one of the master trainers, and there are probably 50 to 100 master trainers in Maryland, or other trainers. And Maryland Family Network in Baltimore runs and coordinates it. But their goal is to train even common lay citizens, everybody in the state, to get trained on it. So, I've done it to church groups. I've done it for business professional associations, business leaders, Leadership Maryland. If that is a great training for the lay public. I did it for drug court, and the father said, "This helps me understand why I'm where I'm at." And he said, "It's the first time I really got it." And so I encourage people, if you can find an ACEs training in your community, if you can't, and you're part of a group, you can host ACEs training, and it's all free. None of the trainers can charge anything for doing the training. So, and Maryland Family Network keeps the list of all the active trainers, and they will put out something like, somebody in Charles County wants ACEs training on these days, who's available? And they will find you a person to do it if you don't know anybody or nobody responds locally. So I encourage people to take that training as well, because it really teaches you about the impact when there's no intervention.
Thank you so much, Cathy. And yes, that was when I was a substitute and was teaching. I was a long-term sub, so I had to do all the trainings. And we did this one, like it was a quarterly, it was like a whole project. Like we did it through a couple months, and it was on ACEs. And transitioning from the school system into Maryland crime victims, really like that kind of like stood out to me. And once you know it, like you've just got a better understanding of it. And there was like some great sessions that were held as part of that project in the book that we read. So definitely highly suggest for anyone who is, if you don't have that training, or if you are interested in just learning more and just, trying to make an impact, I think is useful. It also helped me in dealing with some of the students, because again, I was in middle school, so I was doing 7th and 8th grade, because that's such a challenging time, and that teenagehood is so challenging, and it was really helpful for me to kind of like take a step back and really kind of approach young people in a way that was appropriate and a little bit more thoughtful in what they might be going through at home. So anywho, so I guess my last bit, I got to pull Joanna into this, and really like some of the questions that I had is like, what's next after child abuse? Like, what can we do? And I think that the reason why I asked this is because there's going to be a loaded like court legal question is, when do kids start having rights? And if mom and dad are abusing, like in the case of the young boy in California, and I'm sure many cases in other places where one parent might be doing it and the other one's turning a blind eye, who can advocate for that child in the instances where they need to be removed or what needs to happen? So I guess let me just start with, what age do kids start having rights where they can actually take action on their own?
So kids of any age have rights. So of course, when they're small, they're going to need next of kin. So generally that's the parents. If it's not, and it can be, it can be mom if dad is the abuser, and it can be dad if mom is the abuser, that type of thing. But also, if Maryland Crime Victims doesn't get involved in the custody disputes and what happens in that regards, but if a child is removed from their parents, and goes into the care of whoever is in care of that child and is appointed as their guardian, that person can then advocate for the child and be the victim representative. And so we can also work with that individual. Once children get a little older, they certainly can have representation by themselves. They still need. Now, there are cases where we do get appointed as a guardian ad litem for the child in a criminal case. So we can advocate that way, and then that way we're doing directly what the child wants to do. We can also advocate for the child, and because children are under 18, they can't sign contracts. They can't agree to have an attorney represent them unless the court appoints them as a guardian ad litem, or guardians, signs up for our free legal representation in criminal court. So it can happen either way. It can be court appointed as a guardian ad litem, or it can be as a guardian, somebody with custody over that child can sign on their behalf to get them legal representation with Maryland crime victims. And the thing that we do at Maryland Crime Victims is that we provide legal support for victims of crime, any crime, including child abuse and any other, free of cost to that person. So we will go to court with them. We will go to court on their behalf. We will, speak with the state's attorney's office and represent them in court, advocating for their rights, and so that they have an opportunity to be heard and to be notified about what is going on in the criminal case.
So 18 is still the kind of number that we need to go with as far as on their own. They do need an adult at that time. But does that hold? This is going to be a little. Does that include? Sorry, got distracted. Does that include young people who have been emancipated from their parents?
No, so that would be another exception. If a child is emancipated and has the rights as an adult, then they can enter into contracts, and then we could certainly represent them if they've already gone through that process.
Thanks for that. I don't know why that popped into my head. And so we would still be able to represent them and walk them through the process. Again, we don't do any of the civil stuff, so it wouldn't be any of the custody or divorce or any of those things. And what if this is out there? What if a child doesn't feel like they're being supported by, like they're with their family, they are teenagers. Let's say there's a 12-year-old who's like, mom just lets dad hit on me and whatever. What can they do?
Go to a trusted adult.
Go to another trusted adult.
It needs to be reported, because then that other parent is helping and aiding in the abuse. And so
And sometimes, the kids, I feel like sometimes, kids that are in those situations, they emotionally, like, they're ready to make that break before, like, the other parent might be, like, the mom might be lingering because of XYZ reasons. And I think that as adults, I'm not, I don't want to play the blame game here, but as adults, like, we think, where am I going to go? How am I going to pay rent? How am I going to get, like, right now we need 2 incomes and now I'll have 1. So we kind of think this whole process through, which is why it's important to have other resources, but we think this whole process through. Whereas the kid's like, I don't care, I'll live in the woods. They're packing a little knapsack and they're just ready to roll, just because, we think differently, again, with ages and, things that are going on. We're thinking appropriately for our age, but there might be more hesitation on the other adult versus the child, who might just be sick and tired of being sick and tired. So that's why I wanted to throw that question out there, as far as, like, kind of making that break. And if a child is ready to take it out there, I want to send this out into the world and just make sure that we're covering all our bases as far as people wanting to get help. And I also want for this to be something that maybe young people could share and be like, hey, look, this is what you can do. Go to another adult that would help you, and go to auntie or grandma, grandpa, the teacher that is your favorite teacher that you sit with during lunch, or whoever it is, and try to make some moves forward so that the situation can change. Okay.
I'll also jump in there and say it's important to make sure that children let the other parent know, because oftentimes we see in domestic violence situations where the parent is putting up with it because they think that they are the only one being physically harmed, and they don't realize that children are also being physically harmed. And once that realization comes in, they go, oh, well, now this is unacceptable. They're willing to, like, withstand, the abuse to themselves, because they're, like, trying to provide for their children and do these other things. But oftentimes that's the last straw in a relationship, and encouraging that parent to leave the abuser. And so I just want to throw that out too.
Thanks for that, Joanna. Definitely. I mean, and the child abuse, domestic violence, the entire situation is really something that is, they usually go hand in hand quite often. And so it is important to bring that up, and we can also help with that as well. So, okay. I think that's it, unless there was other things that you guys wanted to add to this conversation. Something we didn't talk about, something that's burning you to not say. But as soon as you get off, you'll think of something. Okay, so I guess in closing, I guess we'll start with Cathy. Was there anything that you wanted to share? And you can also leave the contact info for Center for Children.
The center does a lot of parenting and training, and for both law enforcement, primarily around sexual abuse interviewing and stuff. But we have all kinds of resources, so I would encourage people to reach out if you have a question or anything. If we don't provide it, and there's things that we don't provide, we will certainly get you in the right direction to get you somewhere that can help, somebody that can help you. Because our goal is to, until every child is happy, healthy, and safe is our mission statement. And so that's where we kind of come from. So, please, if you're interested in services or you just have a question, please reach out.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Cathy. And Center for Children is located in Waldorf.
We're actually in La Plata, and then we're also in Prince Frederick and Leonardtown, and we actually have offices for limited programs in Prince George's, Anne Arundel, and Howard.
Lovely. And if someone is asking for resources that are in their area, can you guys help them kind of maneuver through to another
organization? And our webpage has got a lot of information on it, and there's also a contact where you can go through the webpage and send us a message. So it's www.center-for-children.org, and lots of resources there.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Cathy. All right, Taylor.
Well, I want to say thanks for allowing this opportunity. Definitely, it was a good one. I do want to throw our website out there. It's blueribbonproject.org. Blue Ribbon Project, like I said earlier, we provide a variety of programs for abused and neglected children and provide support for children that are in foster care. We've got a lot of great community partnerships out there as well. And if you don't mind, I'll throw a plug in there real quick we have what's called the Blue Ribbon Bash. It's coming up on May the 4th from 6 to 10 p.m. It's going to be in Severna Park. More information on that and tickets and that sort of information, like silent auction, all kinds of good stuff, that can all be found on our website at blueribbonproject.org.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Taylor. And I just want to add, he's got 1 billion items on his auction. So go ahead and head over there, grab some fun things, and all that good stuff. And the other thing that I wanted to add to Taylor's push is that I recently just saw that. So they do this backpack program. You guys are probably very familiar. Everyone at home is probably familiar. Kids that are kind of they are being removed, or they're getting out of situations. They create these little backpacks for them. And so he's constantly collecting for things like that. And I know that he's doing things in La Plata and Charles, Anne Arundel, and kind of all over. So if there's something where people want to donate items, great reason to donate items to help support kids that are already in traumatic situations. So I will throw that out there for you, Taylor, and hope that you have a great bash in Severna Park. And all right, Joanna.
All right, I was just going to throw out there too that I know Center for Children does do counseling for children who have been victims of abuse, and it's a great resource. It's one of the very few places that actually provides counseling for children, and for very young children as well. It includes play counseling and therapy and stuff like that. And so I just want to throw that out so that people know that they are a resource, and to certainly go there for that. Also, you can also get a hold of Maryland Crime Victims, where our website is MD Crime Victims, and the victims has an S at the end, .org. And if you go there, we have also a phone number if you'd rather just call us. If there is a case and you need assistance with that, we are happy to help. So I'll leave it there. Thank you to our guests for joining us. I really appreciate you guys being here today.
Thanks so much for that, Joanna. I definitely want to co-sign on the counseling for younger children. My highly spirited child was seen when he was young at Center for Children. And it was, for me, it was challenging to find help or someone to talk to him because he was only 4 at the time. And I was calling here, there, this place, the other, and that nobody would deal with him because he was so young. And I just wanted to make sure that he was okay because he was had some issues with my ex-husband and I's separation, and so he had a lot of angst in him, and I just wanted a tertiary person, a professional, to see him. And so, I share my personal experience and my personal info just because, it could help someone else out there. So, so definitely for the young kids, it's hard to find resources for people that young and small. And so that is amazing and great. And he thought it was just playtime. So it was really nice. Also, we are, so just another plug for us really quick is our walk is this Saturday. It is a 5K walk and resource fair that is free. If you are a runner, you can sign up to get timed as well, if that's your thing. And the resource fair is a bunch of different resources. So if you want to know how you can help other crime victims or what resources are available, a bunch of nonprofits are going to be there, including counseling, the police department, fire departments, and all kinds of great organizations that help people on different journeys. It could be the loss of a child, stillbirth, anything. Like we've just really kind of gotten a bunch of different people. You just never really know what resources people need, and you never really know what people are going through at home, which is, again, why we do this. You can share this this video if you think that it can help someone. You just don't know who you're helping with a quick share. And that's why we do all of these. Please check out our other videos if they move you, if you find that someone can use them. And also thank you to Deidre Jackson, who is one of our clients, for tuning in and adding great bits of information in our chat box. It's always great when people are engaging in that capacity and really kind of adding the things that we might be overlooking because we're just so ready to stay on answering these different questions. So thank you again to Cathy and Taylor. We really appreciate it.
Thank you all for doing it.
See you guys soon. And if there's another topic that you feel that we can do, then we would love to do it. All right.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks.
Have a great week.
You as well.